Hello students, today we are going to do the Battle of Blenheim by Robert Southey. Robert Southey was an English romantic poet. He was the poet laureate, that is the court poet of his time. He wrote his poem in 1796 about a battle that took place in Blenheim, a village in southern Germany in 1704. It is an anti-war poem that sharply criticizes the destruction and death caused by war. The poet uses the simple narrative of a grandfather explaining to his two children his own suffering and the suffering of many others like him who were victims of the battle. The grandfather cannot give any good reason for war and can only repeat that it was a famous victory. Obviously, this was the propaganda that was indoctrinated in the common people. The poet wants to emphasize through the repetition of the lines that war are senseless, futile, and evil, and that in war there are no real winners. This is a powerful poem that echoed Wilfred Owen's famous quote, "The pity of war." Wilfred Edward Salter Owens MC was an English poet and soldier. He was one of the leading poets of the First World War. This poem is a wake-up call to all peaceful solutions to all conflicts. So children, let us start the poem. It was a summer evening. Old Kaspar's work was done. So how does the poem start? What is the setting? It was a summer evening. And old Kaspar's work, whatever work he had to do, he had already completed that work. And he, before his cottage door, was sitting in the sun. So he was sitting outside his cottage door. So he was in the village. Cottages are usually in a village. And was sitting in the sun. That is, he was basking in the sun. And by him spotted on the green his little grandchild Wilhelmine. Now he was sitting outside the cottage door, and the grandchild, what is the name of his grandchild? Wilhelmine. Now what she was doing is, and by spotted on the green, so she was playing. Spotted means playing on the green grass. Who was it? What was the name of the child? Wilhelmine. She saw her brother Peterkin roll something large and round. So Wilhelmine saw her brother Peterkin. So they are the grandchildren of old Kaspar. Okay. So Wilhelmine saw Peterkin roll something. And what was that? That was something large and round in shape, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found. So here rivulet is a small stream. Okay. So he had found something beside the rivulet, that is the stream, in playing there had found. He was playing beside it, and so he had found it there. He came to ask what he had found. He did not understand when he looked at it what it was. So he caught it with him, and he wanted to ask his grandfather what he had found that was so large and smooth and round. So that's how it was. It was something large, smooth, and round. In this stanza, children, a suspense is created in the reader's mind as to what this large, smooth, and round thing might be. Here, the young boy does not know that what this object really is. So there is an innocence involved in it. So the next stanzas are a contrast where he will be aware of what the horrors of war are. So there is a sharp, this stanza is a sharp contrast to the other stanzas that are to follow. Old Kaspar took it from the boy who stood expectant by. Now old Kaspar, he took the object which the boy had. He took it and he started examining it. Who stood expectant by? Expectant means who was eager, who was hopeful that he would come to know what actually he was playing with. And then the old man shook his head with a natural sigh. So it naturally came out. He just shook his head, looking at what was there. So he just took the object and he shook his head. And naturally he was feeling sad for it. It is some poor fellow's skull. So what it was some person's skull, said he, who fell in the great victory. So it was some poor fellow's skull. Now this poor fellow could have been a soldier who died fighting in the war, or it could have been even the one of the citizens who had lost their life, the innocent citizens who had lost their lives, who fell in the great victory. Now the great victory here is referred to the Battle of Blenheim. That is what we are talking about. I find them in the garden, for there are many hereabout. So when the grandfather is plowing the field, he says, I find them many over there. When I'm plowing the field, I find a lot many there. More skulls are buried there. And often when I go to plow, the plowshare turns them out. So when the grandfather is plowing the field, the plowshare, what is that? The broad cutting blade of a plow. That is the teeth of the plow. Okay. So when he's plowing it to sow the seeds, at that point of time, he finds the skull there. Many skulls there. For many thousands men, said he, were slain. Slain means killed in the great victory. So many of them had lost their lives that they lie buried over there. So whenever he's sowing the field with the plowshare, okay, so at that point of time, he gets the skulls, many skulls. In this stanza, visual imagery is used here. Like the grandfather, when he's plowing the fields, at that point of time, when he's plowing the fields, he gets many skulls. So a visual imagery is formed in your minds. We plow the fields to sow the crops, and so we can get nourishment from it. But is it possible to get nourishment from it when there are so many dead bodies buried under it? Through this stanza, the poet is trying to hint that though this war had taken place many years before, but its effect is still felt, as the horrors of war cannot be buried away. They are bound eventually to hit back. Though the poet stresses on this point, not one or two, but there were many of thousands of men who were killed in this great victory. Now tell us what it was all about. Young Peterkin, he cries. So he's asking his grandfather, tell us about the war, what it was all about. What happened? Young Peterkin, he cries. So he cries. The word cries here, used here, that suggests the extent to which that young Peterkin was eager to know about the battle. He did not know at that time that the description of war to be given by his grandfather would be rather saddening and scary. He was eager to hear something amazing and exciting about the war. He thought his grandfather knew a lot of interesting things about it. And little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. So Wilhelmine, she had curiosity in her eyes. She was curious to know as to what and why the war took place. Wilhelmine was eager to get some amazing answer to her question. Now the figure of speech used here is alliteration, as the constant W has been used here twice. Wonder waiting eyes. So W is used here twice. And now tell us all about the war and what they fought each other for. So here they wanted to know the reason for the war, what they fought each other for. It was the English, Kaspar cried, who put the French to rout. Rout means defeated completely. Here Kaspar talks about the victory of British Austrian forces over their French opponents. But what they fought each other for, I could not well make out. So here he is not able to understand what was the reason as to why they had a fight, why there was a war at all. But everybody said, quoth he, that it was a famous victory. But he quickly adds there that whatever it was, whatever the reason might be, but it was a famous victory. Now the use but is used here, which signifies that The common people it does not matter to the common people as to why the wars are fought. What is the reason for the war? The common person, the common man, he blindly follows whatever is told to him. Now here, Kaspar says that everybody said that it was a famous victory. Now everybody here refers to people like him, common people like him, and also the straight propaganda. My father lived in Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. Now his father, that is Kaspar, the old Kaspar, that's the grandfather, Kaspar's father, he lived at Blenheim then, that is that time. Yon means yonder, little stream hard by. Yon means yonder and hard by means quite near. So it was quite near the stream. They burnt his dwelling to the ground and he was forced to fly. So here is referred to the father because he was the one who was responsible for the family. At that point of time, grandfather Kaspar was very young. So he could not take any decision. It was his father who took all the decision and who was responsible for the family. So what did they do to his dwelling? Dwelling means house. Dwelling, what did they do to his dwelling or the house? They burnt it down to the ground. And he was forced to fly, means he was forced to run away from there. So with his wife and child, he fled. So with his wife, that is Kaspar's father and mother. Wife is the mother. And child, that is he himself, he fled. That is ran away. Nor had he where to rest his head, and he did not have any place to go and rest. With fire and sword, the country round was wasted far and wide. Fire and sword means burning and killing. And far and wide means it was destroyed or ruined up to a great distance. So there were many lives were lost and there was many houses burnt down. And lot of destruction was done to the country and to people's life. And many a childing mother then and a newborn baby died. So there were many women who were pregnant who died, and even the newborn babies died. But things like this, must be. It's inevitable at every famous victory. So he says this is the cost that they have to pay for this famous victory. He says this is the cost, that is the price that you have to pay for the famous victory. They say it was a shocking sight. What was a shocking sight? Everywhere there were dead bodies lying around after the field was won. So this was the aftermath. That is the effect, the consequences of war. That everywhere there were bodies lying. For many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. So there were so many dead bodies that there was no proper burial done. Okay, so that's why they lay rotting in the sun. But things like this, must be after a famous victory. So he says after a famous victory, a victory like this is the price that we have to pay. This is inevitable. We cannot stop that. Great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugenie. Great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugenie. Now, Duke of Marlborough was the English commander, and Prince Eugenie was from Austria. Now, these were the hero of the war, according to old Kaspar. Why, it was a very wicked thing, said little Wilhelmine. Now she protests that why are you calling this a great victory when it is a wicked thing? It has taken lives of so many people. Na, my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. But the grandfather, old Kaspar, he stops her and he says, no, whatever it is, it was a famous victory. And everybody praised the Duke who this great fight did win. So, but what good came out of it at last, quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he. but it was a famous victory. Now here old Caspar again referred to the public praise for the glorious victory won by the Duke of Marlborough at Blenheim. Little Peterkin, like his sister, failed to appreciate the views about the war. He wanted to know what good at last came out of the war. The old man was puzzled and said he could not tell that, but asserted parrot-like that it was a famous victory. Old Caspar, who is the speaker in the poem, describes the horrible consequences of the war fought there. He even tells his grandchildren how his own family was affected and forced to mitigate elsewhere in the aftermath of that war. This is reinforced by the opinion of his little granddaughter, who refers to war as something wicked. Despite all this, the speaker admires Duke Marlborough and Prince Eugene, who led the winning side of the war. Moreover, he frequently refers to the war as a famous victory. Now, why did this is done? Why does the grandfather refers to it as a famous victory? Why? Because these people, the commoners, the common people are brainwashed. This is how the state propaganda works. They brainwash the people, and the people understand, the common people just understand what is served to them. They do not understand, even after understanding this, that it had a very disastrous effect on the people. Still they say it is a famous victory. Subscribe to my channel for the latest updates.